If you've spent any time in gardening circles lately, you've probably heard the phrase the Nobel Prize Weed whispered with equal parts awe and suspicion. It sounds impressive, almost heroic, a weed killer so powerful, so scientifically celebrated, that people casually link it to Nobel-level brilliance. And yet, gardeners are warned again and again, don't use it. When gardeners use the phrase Nobel Prize weed, they're usually talking about glyphosate, the active ingredient in many popular herbicides. The nickname doesn't mean glyphosate itself won a Nobel Prize. Instead, it comes from the broader scientific breakthroughs connected to plant biochemistry and enzyme pathways, discoveries that did earn Nobel recognition and later made chemicals like glyphosate possible. That association alone gave glyphosate an almost mythic status. For decades it was marketed as precise, modern, and safe when used correctly, a triumph of science over weeds. To many growers, it felt like progress in a bottle. But gardening wisdom doesn't stop at marketing. It lives in soil, seasons, and long-term results, and that's where the warnings begin. So, glyphosate works by blocking a specific enzyme pathway that, well, plants need to grow. Now, humans don't have that same pathway, which is why, early studies suggested it was relatively harmless to us. This detail actually became the foundation of its reputation as a so-called smart herbicide. For industrial agriculture, this was, honestly, revolutionary, and for home gardeners, it sounded perfect. Just spray once, kill weeds all the way down to the root, and move on with life. No constant pulling, no endless mulching, no battle. But, gardens are not laboratories, and soil is definitely not a sterile environment. Here's where Roots Haven Grounds leans in close and, gets real with you. Healthy soil is alive. It's actually a complex underground city of fungi, bacteria, protozoa, insects, and organic matter all working together. When we apply glyphosate, we're not just targeting weeds, we're disturbing that living system. Research and field observations have shown that repeated use can disrupt beneficial soil microbes. These microbes are responsible for breaking down nutrients, building soil structure, and protecting plant roots from disease. When they suffer, plants suffer quietly, slowly, and often invisibly. Gardeners notice this as weaker plants increase disease pressure in soil that seems tired no matter how much compost you add. The warning isn't about instant catastrophe, it's about long-term consequences. In small-scale gardens, we don't need nuclear-level solutions. Glyphosate doesn't just remove weeds, it removes competition and balance. Over time, soils can become dependent on chemical control instead of biological resilience. There's also the issue of drift and residue. Even careful spraying can affect nearby plants, especially in warm or windy conditions. Fruit trees, young seedlings, and beneficial plants often take unintended hits. And then there's resistance. Weeds adapt, The more a single solution is used, the more nature pushes back. This has led to tougher, harder to control weeds that now require even stronger interventions. That's not a road most home gardeners want to walk. You've likely heard heated debates about glyphosate and human health. Some shout danger, others shout dismissal. As gardeners, we don't need panic, we need prudence. The truth is nuanced. Regulatory bodies around the world disagree on long-term risks, especially with chronic exposure. What's clear is this: home gardeners often lack protective equipment, training, and controlled conditions. We spray in sandals. We garden with kids nearby. We store products in sheds next to tools and feed. Even if risks are debated, unnecessary exposure isn't smart stewardship. Roots Haven Grounds always stands for one principle: if a tool creates more uncertainty than benefit, there's usually a better way. Why old-school methods are making a comeback. Pulling weeds isn't glamorous, mulching isn't exciting, cover crops don't come in shiny bottles, but they work with nature instead of against it. So, thick, organic mulch, it really blocks light and feeds soil life. Ground covers, on the other hand, they outcompete weeds naturally. If you use proper spacing and keep your soil healthy, you can actually reduce weed pressure before it even starts. And, honestly, even just timing, like knowing when weeds germinate, can seriously cut your workload in half. These methods, well, they don't promise instant results. What they do promise are lasting gardens. And here's the quiet secret. Gardens managed this way often need less effort over time, not more. When science meets wisdom, science gave us these really powerful tools, but wisdom, well, it teaches us when to use them and honestly, when not to. Glyphosate earned its reputation through scientific achievement, but gardening is not just chemistry, it's ecology, it's patience, it's understanding that, every shortcut has a cost. That's why so many experienced gardeners eventually put the bottle down. Not out of fear, but out of respect for their soil and the future of their gardens. What Roots Haven Grounds recommends instead is, well, focusing on systems, not sprays. Build soil first, use organic matter generously, observe before acting, and, choose solutions that improve your garden year after year, not just for one season. So, weeds are often messengers. They let us know about things like compacted soil, nutrient imbalance, or even bare ground. If you fix the message, well, the messenger disappears. That's real control, and honestly, that's gardening with confidence. So, here are my final thoughts for fellow gardeners. The so-called Nobel Prize weed isn't evil, but it isn't magic either. It really represents a moment when science promised control, and gardeners later realized that control without balance, well, it comes at a price. Your garden doesn't need prestige chemicals. What it really needs is thoughtful care, living soil, and honestly, a gardener who's willing to play the long game. If this article helped you see weed control a little differently, go ahead and share it with a fellow gardener who's still fighting the same battles every season. And if you want more grounded, honest, soil-first wisdom like this, make sure to subscribe to Roots Haven Grounds and, pass the knowledge along. Gardens grow better when gardeners grow smarter, together.